Greetings! Welcome to the devlog for update 27 of Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades. We're going to start off as always with a quick sound check. Make sure your speakers aren't up too high. Wonderful! So what have we got for you this week? Well, we have a whole bunch of enhancements and then an entirely, or rather the beginning of an entirely new mode. So I'm going to start where things are familiar over here in the arena scene with some system changes that have been made. So first off, more on the silly end, something that everyone asked almost immediately with the chainsaw was, can I please put weapon attachments on it? And you'll be happy to know that it took a refactor of the entire attachment system, but you can now affix things like laser sights to it. Let's see if I can actually turn it on. There we go. Wonderful. So just in case you need that extra bit of precision with your chainsawing, there you have it. And this was done. I put some rails on the drill here as well, which goes the correct direction now. Game no longer broken. And was done in part just to facilitate using the attachment system for a bunch of other things in the future, but also was done because I was tuning a bunch of things about the melee weapon system. So the first major change with melee weapons is that damage is computed differently with them. Before, and I noticed this in a whole bunch of meat grinder playthrough videos, there'd be a lot of people who would take something like an axe or a hammer, and they'd be right up against something, and they would rapidly sort of tap it to death with sort of no momentum behind the hit. And this is something that honestly affects almost every VR game that I've played that has sort of melee combat, is that it's difficult to really think about how this should do damage based on its speed and movement because, well, the controller we're holding is the same weight, and in real life, the damage something like this would do beyond its sort of edge, striking something, is in part the fact that this would be like, 3 or 4 kilograms, and I've accelerated it to the speed to be able to hit something. So I've changed the way the damage computation is done. It's now based on a sort of internal inertial calculation. So doing this against something is not going to do much damage. You actually need to have some distance behind a swing. So I definitely recommend pretty much regardless of which one of the sort of standard melee weapons you're using, you either want to come in for sort of long jabs or long sort of sweeping strikes. You can do them fast, you don't have to do them slow, but what matters to a major degree is that you actually have a full wind up and then a sort of long distance of travel with the strike. In addition to that, and this sort of stemmed from a request with the hammer, which was, can I turn this around so that our tines can hit things? All of the standard melee weapons have alternate poses now, and you can activate these by just clicking the trigger. So in the case of the hammer, that will allow us to switch to striking with the tines. For the axe, clicking sort of allows us to invert the axe, like so. So you can come up with a sort of underhand. This makes this a really great secondary weapon against Slicer, because your hand hitbox is sort of up here, so you can sort of deflect and grapple with it. Let's see what else. With the wrench, the alternate pose, like, starts here and sort of comes out, almost like you're holding it very much by the tip and trying to reach with it. And then for the crowbar, here's our sort of default pose. This is where my hand is, and we can click and we can pull it in. So you can sort of stab out with the crowbar and use this to hook and pull towards yourself more rapidly, or use it, cycling back to push a slicer away, and eventually the other sort of physics active agents that I've planned. So yeah, so give that a shot. Crowbar plus axe here is still my favorite combination personally. But I'd love to know what you think. In addition, because of the fact that sort of long strikes are privileged, melee has been nerfed a little bit in general, as I think in Meat Grinder people are finding it a little too effective against the wiener bots. So you have to be more intelligent about your strikes. You can't just sort of flail away like this and expect it to go well for you. So yeah. What next? Oh, and in addition to that, one of the sort of changes that's come along with the system refactors is that in fixing a bug that was present with the flashlight in Meat Grinder, some of you might have experienced this where you'd basically put it in a quick belt slot, and if you moved your head like this, it would slowly go off center to the left or right. That's been fixed. But in the process of doing so, I had to basically rebuild also the whole quick belt pose system. And so in doing so, objects are now oriented a little bit differently. So if I say pull up a PX4 here and put it in the slot, you'll notice that it's a little more, it's close. Oops. Don't be me. I have, for hand-to-hand reasons, I have my grip button release set to double click to release. But yeah, so alignment is slightly different now for most of the quick belt slots. The biggest change relates to rifles that I think is a major help. And I'm not sure how much, because of just FOV and stuff, this will come through in the video. But if I take, say, the AKM here, before, when we would put that up in the quick belt slot next to our head, it was totally invisible to us. If we caught a shadow of it, we would know it was there. Now, because of this sort of realignment that has rifles sort of pointing more straight down, if I put it up here and turn my head down, hopefully it's within the FOV, you can see that the rifle is in fact visible as being up there, easy to pull out. But what's cool about this as well is it's just within our field of view to actually grab it out by its foregrip like so and transition right into a firing position. So you don't even have to just grab it by its main grip. You can snap out with the fore, which is even more useful for shotguns. So definitely give that a shot. I find the really long rifles, like an AKM with a suppressor or a Dragunov, are far more convenient to use and quickly withdraw when they're up in a head quick belt slot. Oh yeah, also just melee-wise, just as a goof, I had this model laying around of a spiked mace. I'm probably going to throw in a couple more medieval weapons just because I like them and not because it makes any sense at all. So yeah. So, on to the meat of this update and the thing that has been the bane of my existence. So we're going to jump over to a new scene. So, we are over in our new level. Looks a bit rough around the edges. It's very much programmer art at the moment. And the reason for that is that I have been getting working a user-generated scenario system. This is very much, it's so alpha, I can't even describe it. I've spent almost all of my energy the past week and a half, actually, since Unite, trying to get this all working, which is a sort of core loop of creating a new level and saving it and building from templates, etc. So we're just going to jump in and take a look at this. I'm going to name our level here, please work. Select this template. We'll get a button down here, create and enter edit mode, which is going to load our template. And we are now in our template. You can tell you are actually in it because it is actually bright here. Gotta love that default Unity skybox there. So what can we do in this? Well, the purpose of this first alpha, and it's what I would like those of you who want to edit and sort of make content for H3 eventually in the form of levels and scenarios, is try out two tools that I've made. You'll see them here. They are kinematically locked by default, meaning that when you release them, they just hang in the air. And this is basically the entity spawner, and this is the entity editor. And so the way this basically works is that we will, you can pick one of these up. If you click down on the touchpad, you will toggle its locking behavior. So when I actually release this, this will just fall, and I can put it in my quick belt. Oops, gotta actually unlock it. If we click left or right on the touchpad, we will pull up a menu, like so, which is our various sorts of entities. And this can go in either direction, for whether you're left or right-handed, in terms of just how you want to use and view this. And we can click a second time in that direction to scale it up nice and large. So basically, think anytime you see one of these, think of this as just being like a window. So what we then have with our entity spawner is this: we've got a tags list on the left-hand side and an items list here. These will be gone in the release. These were basically just testing to make sure my tag system was working. But the way this works is that if you click on a tag here, it will then only show you below unselected tags for which there are objects that exist that both have this tag and one of these. Right now, the only functional entities I have in are these modular blocks, which I'll be showing you in a moment, but eventually it will be tons of objects. And so I decided to go with a tag-based structure instead of a category and subcategory-based structure, just because that handles large numbers of objects so much better from an organizational standpoint. So let's create ourselves an entity. I'm going to scale that down a bit. We're going to pick our large one here. So when we actually click on one, we get an image and a description of the entity. So this is one of our modular blocks. We get a spawn volume for it, and this will not allow this to be spawned if it intersects something that exists. And so we're just going to spawn this. Go back there. Just leave that up hanging there. And all entities in this edit mode spawn in what's called kinematically locked mode, just like the controllers. I can just pick it up, hold it, and it just stays there. The default behavior is that when these are sort of entering in play mode, they don't have gravity. They're sort of they're more like a static scene object. But we have a bunch of options for that. So let's pull open our entity editor here, pop its screen open, and just go ahead and point it at this entity. And of course, it would decide to not work. All right, so we're back. Figured it out. It was a GUI rendering order issue that when I was testing it worked fine yesterday and decided to break. But anyway, so we have an entity editor here, which you can see as its laser sort of points out and strikes that entity. We have the name of it, the 0.8 by 0.8 by 0.8 meter blocks, and we've got some parameters that we can set for it that I'm slowly filling out, and it's going to be everything from being able to recolor certain objects to whether you want something to be easier or harder to destroy, etc. So in the case of this block, as I mentioned, these are kinematically locked unless they're not. You can totally turn them into an object with regular gravity. And in the case of this, we've got another parameter, blocks material, which we can change it to be metal or I believe that was, yeah, that's like plaster or wood. And this is changing not just the visual material of it, but the physical material in regards to the ballistics system and how easy it shatters and such. So yeah, so give that a shot as well. Let me know what you think of it. I'm going to go ahead and spawn a few more blocks here. All right. And then when I like what I have, I can hit this Save Changes to Level button. And then if I want to actually play with it, because these aren't destructible now, I'm in edit mode. We go to Load Existing Levels. We have our level here, Please Work. Actually, I have two of them. And load into play mode. And that just fired all those off like nuts. All right, we've finally gotten this straightened out. I swear today, it's like a comedy of errors. So, take two. We're going to load Please Work into load into play mode. Yay, and it doesn't explode, and they're physics active. So let's go ahead and grab ourselves a firearm to play with these. One more sound check. This will be loud. Boom. So these are destructible. In general, the sort of philosophy that I want to bring to the entities that are going in these levels is to focus on dynamism, focus on things that can be destroyed, things that are interesting to score against, and decorations that allow, stuff that really makes the player's body and position in a space meaningful, etc. So yeah, so thankfully that worked. So cool. So now that we know this all works, we're going to go through the entire pipeline unbroken once more for those of you who want to play around with this system. So I'm going to hit exit to lobby. We're at the lobby. This is where we create a new level. We want to pick a name for it. It's finally working. I'm totally jinxing myself now by doing this. Select our template. When the template's been selected, we can create and enter edit mode. We are loaded in edit mode. We can use the entity spawner here to spawn ourselves a bunch of objects. Etc. We can, if we want to, we can pick these up. We can reposition them, build something different with them, like so. We can use our entity editor here to make them actually physical, like so. We can change what material they are made out of. Like so. When we're happy with what we have, we can save changes to the level, click load existing level, and load our level, it's finally working, into play mode. And once we're in play mode, we can, of course, spawn anything we want from the item spawner. We can shoot things. We can... Oh, man, that was a terrible throw. That's why you don't have that on double click drop if you want to throw things. Let's see if we can actually knock this off here. Might be too high mass. Nope. Boom. Etc. So yeah, so enjoy. Let me know what you think. We're going to jump out of VR mode. I'm exhausted from trying to get this to work while demoing it.
Yo, so that was special getting that all working. It's been a frustrating day after a frustrating week. So, but anyway, other stuff in this update, mostly little stuff because so much of this week was just saving and loading blocks, which seems like the least exciting thing on the planet, but in all seriousness, what I just showed you is the most complex thing I have ever coded in my life, to get all of that working. So, and so much of the infrastructure of it is not visible and will make more sense once there's more objects and more templates and things like that. So yeah, in terms of other fixes, I fixed some reflection issues in the friendly 45 range and in the in the sniper range. A whole bunch of just low-level flag stuff was being set incorrectly in a bunch of cases. That's been fixed. Fixed some ballistic computation errors that were getting on my nerves. Let's see. Oh, the tactical knife actually does damage now. Part of the whole reason that it didn't before, in case you're wondering, and this is one of those like hashtag this is why you don't use inheritance or over rely on it, is that the attachment system was something that only worked with firearms. So to be able to just goofily throw some rails on that tactical knife, it was technically a firearm, which meant that when I then built melee objects, they could do damage from collisions and things like that, but the knife couldn't. But that's been fixed. The knife can. So I moved a whole bunch of things around. So let's see here. Let's see that. Objects won't fall through the floor in the warehouse scene anymore. I don't know exactly what was going on, but it's been fixed. Oh, and then a really important one, which was some of you may have noticed in the using the chainsaw or the drill, that in rare circumstances the sound would just go off for it, or it would appear to be like half on and half not. That was basically a strange no ref that was happening. Little PSA to Unity devs out there: if you are using interfaces in Unity in C#, be aware that you can't null check them, an interface reference. the way you can a reference to any mono behavior, because Unity obviously overrides the equals operator for null checking, which is super useful despite the headaches it causes. But you can't do that with an interface reference because C# doesn't support operator overloading and interfaces mixing together. So if you need to null check an interface reference properly, like damageable for example, you need to cast that interface reference to the mono because you have grabbed a mono behavior. So just cast it to it, or have a sort of an or there and null check it the system.object way and the Unity object way at the same time. It took far too long to hunt down that was what was occurring. So yeah, so in terms of stuff that is coming up next, I'm going to continue really working on the user-generated scenario system for the most part. In part because it doesn't, at the moment, it doesn't make a ton of sense for me to keep adding scenes to the game at the moment that are just sort of fixed state. It's one of those types of things that I can only output so many things, and there's a lot of stuff that you folks would like to see and be able to play with and do with those scenes and just with your H3 experience. And so I'm going to be throwing a ton of my energy into getting this system up and running in what is going to be sort of 3 phases. The alpha phase, which we're in right now for it, is getting the sort of the UI and the user experience and the flow working, making sure that it's bug-free and that it makes sense. The phase 2 will be actually doing it with something that looks pretty and is more functional. So phase 2, sort of the beta, will be adding a whole bunch more entities, including stuff that is more than sort of just static or destructible. I've got the sort of 2 really challenging systems that I'm going to have to author on top of it is a sort of modular scoring system. So when you say create a level with a template, you'll be able to be like, is this a level that's just a sandbox that we play around with? Is this a level that's like an IPSC sort of target sequence, or a 3-gun sort of target sequence where there's a sort of fixed scoring rules and targets need to be, say, shot from behind a certain line, or the player has to be standing in a certain area. So getting that set up in a way that it all works but it's still easy enough for you to configure is going to take some effort and thinking. Or the sort of 3rd category, which is the sort of damage-based modes. So where the player's health is active, they can die and respawn, but things like robots and agents and eventually turrets and traps and a bunch of other stuff I have planned will be able to be spawned. So this mode should be able to encompass all of those things. And in sort of phase 3, we'll be sort of filling out the tail end of those, adding more templates, and most importantly, implementing Steamworks support. So once the system, basically once I know 100% that the data structure for these levels is not going to change, because it's going to change. Warning, anyone who's playing around with this or testing it, don't get too attached to anything you build out of the blocks, because if I have to change the data structure at all, when H3 updates, it's going to just wipe out your prior saved levels because they just won't load correctly. But once it's to the point where that will never happen again, we're going to implement Steamworks support, and you're going to be able to share these with each other because it's a really compact format. So yeah, so that is where almost all of my energy is going at the moment, because I want to build. You know, it's one of those, if I'm adding feature assets that, whether or not they're for this explicitly or some special mode I want to make, they should be going into the entity system. If I'm making something, I don't want to just use it for one purpose. I want to configure it in such a way in the game so that you can use it however you want in the game. So yeah. So I will stop rambling for now, especially because I'm just, after, you know, 2 hours of fighting with Unity GUI errors and bizarre behaviors while recording this devlog, I need a drink. So, but have fun with this. Let me know what you think on Reddit and in the Steam community forums. And I promise you, next update we'll have something splody and fun as well. So, peace.